Hi, this is Marcus Pulis, and this is Aquarian Anarchy. As usual, I've got my friends here with me, Chad and Nico, and you will notice that we also have a guest this week. This is Mark Kreslins. He has made a journey that a lot of anarchists have not made. He has served in Republican congressional administration. He was a Tea Party radio host, and that is just where his real enlightenment began. Since those days, he's become a leader in the secessionist movement, an author, and has a profile on the site for the Mises Institute. Mark now considers himself a voluntarist. All of this he has done from a foundation in the biblical teachings of Jesus Christ. And I met Mark when I met Mark, sort of, and I don't know that meeting is the real term, because really this is the first time I've ever actually talked to him, but I was told to look him up by a guy named Red State Secession. He said, you need to check him out because he's talking a very similar game to what you're talking about, and this is back when I was working for Adam Kokesh for his campaign. Over the past few months, probably about a year now, I've had a few interactions with Mark, almost every time, just spot on what he's talking about. And he started talking about that he's writing a book and talking about his past. I was like, man, this is the perfect kind of solutions-based anarchist we need to have on Aquarian Anarchy. So without further ado, Mark, would you like to introduce yourself to carry anything that I said a little farther?
Well, listen, I appreciate you having me on. I really am. This is really, I think, Marcus, you termed it appropriately. This has been a journey, but isn't it for really all of us at some level? I don't know many people that really start out as anarchists. At least I haven't run. I'm sure there are some out there, but I haven't run across anybody that I've been able to have that kind of conversation with. So inevitably, I run into a ton of people that said, I was here and now I'm here. And as an evangelical born-again Christian myself, it's really the natural home. I knew I was always heading here. It just took me a while to get here. And probably you guys might have some similar stories with me. At some intellectual level, you discover these ideas and you think, well, that makes sense, but, and then comes the famous, let's be realistic. You know, all these things that have been trained in us from kindergarten on, certainly within my experiential timeline working in Capitol Hill, I had to filter all that out. And so, but at the end of the day, as both what I'd like to consider myself to be as a decent thinker and as a follower of Jesus Christ, the most natural place for both of those people to be is in anarchy. And excuse my voice, it's going to break a little bit. I'm fighting a common head cold, so
sure about that.
I know. Believe me, everybody's checking the COVID on me. So, but I think it's the natural home for thinkers, moral people, and Christians. I think this is the natural place for us to be. And I kind of took a journey to get there, though. It took a lot of unlearning. I'm 61 years old, going to be 62 here soon. So I've got, roughly 40 years of adult life where a good part of that has been involved in some level of politics. And so I had to really work through all of that. But it wasn't hard. And then I would tell you this, and you guys might have the same story. Once you arrive there, suddenly it very much like within the Christian community, the experience of the blinders falling off, right? I mean, you kind of suddenly begin to see truth. And arguments become very easy. And I say arguments in the intellectual academic sense, not, yelling at each other, but making good principled arguments becomes the easiest thing to do. And then the hard part becomes helping other people along that journey. That becomes the hard part of having patience and being kind and being gracious and, trying to be understanding that you were there at one point.
Yeah, I struggle with that big time.
So,
I struggled with it today even, but we won't get into that.
I understand. Yeah. So that's kind of my journey where I am now, and I feel home. I feel very much like my faith can be integrated into my societal construct and how I would understand organizing society. It's very easy now to say this is evil and this is right. It's very easy to say this would honor God and this would dishonor him. Those binary kind of decisions, those nearly black and white conditions really are black and white. They no longer become hard. The question is, how do we untangle a large enough group of people to even consider these ideas?
Right.
And isn't this our great challenge? And so I really do try to offer practical ideas of what it looks like to even begin down this road. And I don't know about you guys, but one of the things I found within the anarchy community is almost a litmus test kind of purity, but the standard is so high it can't be achieved. So, I'm a big guy in the Aristotelian belief in scale, that human happiness is related to scale, right? At some level, our happiness finds its form and function in nature based on scale. So let's think about the average pitchfork. It's shaped exactly like a fork, but if we tried to eat with a pitchfork, we couldn't do it. So what did we do? We scaled it down to human function so that we can be happy eating our steaks or mashed potatoes or whatever it is we're eating. Scale is huge. And one of the problems I see in the purest kind of anarchist community is this idea that 7.7 billion people need to become voluntarists or anarchists before we can experience anarchy. And I think, well, if that's your standard, you're never, ever going to achieve it. It is impossible. You have created an impossible standard, and you're just going to make arguments into oblivion because you're never going to arrive there. So this is where I began to meld secession and breaking up the union into a workable plan that says, hey, we're talking a big game over here on the anarchy side. Let's prove we can actually do it. Let's actually prove it at some scale and then scale it from there. So that's kind of the discussions I love to engage in, because once you get there, now you've got people's attention and they'll say, well, I can begin to imagine how that could happen. And now you're there. So.
Right. And what you're doing and the ideas that you're putting out, in some ways, it's almost the opposite of what Adam was doing, because you're kind of talking about a bottom-up kind of approach, whereas Adam was more of talking like a top-down approach where you just take it down from the top down. But what's funny, what I find amusing about that is right now, Adam's doing it the other way.
Right, I saw that.
yeah. So I find that amusing. For me, I'm with you, and we've had discussions on this channel that talk about that we don't know how we get to freedom. We just don't know. And people that think that they do know 100% are fooling themselves or trying to fool a bunch of people and make some money.
Yeah, right.
But we don't really know. You're right. We don't really know. So for me, I look for people who, and that's the point of this show. When Chad, Nico, and I really dove down in what we wanted in this show, we wanted to offer people solutions. And so we try to present those solutions, not saying that this may be it. My opinion is we don't know what it's going to be, and it's going to be a combination of a bunch of stuff. But the point is to try. And to do it in such a way, you'll notice that a lot of the things I make, a lot of are geared towards positive messaging as it relates to anarchy. And that's because so many times people get exposed to exactly what you were talking about, the anger, because government ticks us off. And so they get, right, and I get angry too, I'm not perfect. But so many times we focus on the rebellion and forget that we're talking about an ethical system based on love and compassion. And I cannot think of a better explanation of love and compassion. And to be clear, I'm not a Christian, but the teachings of Jesus are love and compassion.
Absolutely.
So,
No, you're hitting on a really good point, Marcus, and this has been one of my particular issues related to Christian involvement in politics, and I was there, so I have to be very quick to point out that the very things I'm going to discuss right now are things I have done in the past, and I have repented of those things, and I've tried to make amends where I can and say, I was just wrong. I live by an axiom that's very simple. It says it's okay to be wrong. It's just not okay to stay wrong. So when you're confronted with wrong, you can either just be prideful and arrogant and stick there because you have some other thing going on in your mind, or you can just be humble and say, I was just wrong. I remember years ago on my radio show, one of the most difficult times I had was coming on the air after years on the radio promoting a GOP, Republican, Take Back America, Christian conservative idea, only to have to come on my radio show and tell my audience, guys, I was just wrong. Pretty much everything I said the last few years, you've heard me, I was wrong. And I needed to do that because it was just the right thing to do. Now, it ended up that it enabled me to have a lot of other great conversations related to that. But it's one of the great problems that I see in Christianity today that tries to merge with politics is we fail in the central teachings of Jesus Christ, the very entity we claim to follow. So when you go into Matthew chapter 5 and you see the famous sayings of Jesus, we call them the Beatitudes. And in there you see, blessed are the peacemakers. Now, we all know what peace means, but we tend to leave off that word maker. We tend to not like that word because that
peace wanter isn't enough. It's not enough to be a peace wanter.
Exactly right.
Exactly.
On,
I just want to be.
We all kind of want peace, but our job as Christians is to be makers of peace, peacemakers. Now, in a political construct, if you adopt a philosophical ideology that competes with that, i.e. conservatism or Christian conservatism, inevitably, you're no longer a peacemaker. You're not really seeking peace. You're seeking domination, victory, whatever the compulsion, that's what you're seeking under the guise of following Jesus Christ. But we got to be honest with ourselves as Christians. It's a guise. It appears to be Christian, but there's not a lot of Christian to it because it is often missing love and compassion and care and empathy. Now, I think we have an extremely strong argument that says compassion, charity, giving, care, empathy, all those things should be done through the community and not through government. I think that's an absolute easy argument to win as Christians. The trouble is, we're often too busy building, multi-million-dollar churches with huge mortgages and, huge soundboards and chandeliers and staffs of, $4 million payroll. We're so busy building that we're the bad element of the Good Samaritan story. We're the guys that walk by the impoverished, the struggling on our way to church, to our beautiful cathedrals. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem within my side of the equation, the evangelical community. And honestly, that's very difficult to have those conversations right now, especially with Trump as president. And they kind of believe he's the Cyrus of the Old Testament.
He's like sent by Jesus directly.
Yes.
To save us all from something. And it's like, okay.
I know.
It's an interesting, maybe, so you're telling me he sent, he didn't just help convert David, he's like sent old David.
Yeah, right.
before he helped convert him, he's just like, hey, why don't you go do this, mess around with Bathsheba, you do all this kind of stuff for me, do it for me.
Yes.
Like, no, we got it twisted big time.
It's pretty troubling. And these are the conversations we got to have. These are the tough conversations we got to work through. And from the Christian perspective, the ultimate answer and forum that our Christianity can be lived out within community, the sense of a community, is anarchy and voluntarism. I wrote an article. It's up on my website, lovegodwithyourmind.com. And the title of the article is, was Hobbes right, Thomas Hobbes, or was God right when it comes to man and the state of nature? These rather abstruse philosophical arguments that really aren't so true. They actually defined a lot of how we interact with each other in government. But Thomas Hobbes posits famously that man in the state of nature is going to live a cold, brutish, snobbish, and short life. That's just man without government. In the state of nature, literally, essentially just means no government. So Hobbes, Locke is agreeing. He has a different solution. It's a different kind of government, but he's still essentially agreeing. And I get it. You're in England and you're going through the Civil War and things are hell and so things are tough, and you can see man at its worst when you're in war, especially a civil war. So I get that Hobbes has got some biases in his lifetime that suggest that man left without government to his own ambitions is going to live a cold, brutish, snobbish, and short life. I get it, why he would do that. But it doesn't mean it's right. It just means that's what his position was, and he argued for it. And let's be honest, some of the framers of the Constitution embraced that ethos. They just took it upon it. They said yes.
Yeah, well,
they argued.
How much of that do you think, though, is because I've heard this often described, and I think it's appropriate here, given the context of everything that we're talking about here with the eternal, the afterlife, and the supernatural, or whatever you want to call it. There have been descriptions of, and Nico and I talked about this, but that was kind of the conversation that we had that ended up bringing Nico to the show, where we were talking about how trying to describe or to understand heaven here as us is a lot like a baby in the womb trying to explain what this life out here is like. They're going to describe it as, well, so it's a bigger womb, and maybe it's warmer, maybe it's a little colder, I don't know, but it's a big womb. There's more of it. It's better. The food the food that comes into your umbilical cord, you can actually taste it. And it's still like limited by your level of perception, like what you're actually capable of seeing. So I wonder if, when you talk about that stuff, like you're looking at the framers and looking at Locke and Hobbes too, and a lot of these philosophers, that's why it's always interesting to me to see, we get criticized a lot as anarchists, as libertarians, as voluntarists for, we're supposed to show me an example where that's worked before. It's like, but you're missing the brilliance of this, and that we are actually theorizing what world could be like in a state that it, for the most part, has never been in before, because people have sought to dominate each other, and they've used these governmental types of programs to or concepts to do it, and they've used a lot of they've used the divine as a way of saying, like, just like we were talking about with Trump. You had divine rights of kings and all these other different things that have played into that. So I wonder sometimes if it's not so much just a kind of a symptom of being a human and living under the thumb of government, that you just imagine, well, what if government was just better? Instead of, what would it be like without this stuff? And so instead of saying man's, state of nature is going to be this brutish, animalistic, very Neanderthal kind of lifestyle, instead, what if we're capable of like some of the most amazing things? Because in reality, government doesn't actually make any of this stuff that we have, and they just steal money from people and force them to make it. But it's still private people making this stuff, or they have these big contracts where they pay them to make it. But it's still like the whole thing about who's going to build the roads. Well, the same people who are building the roads now, it just won't be stolen from us to pay for it. Right. It'll be a lot of the same contractors and everything else. It'll just be a more competitive market, and there won't be theft involved. That's the only difference.
Yeah, Chad, I love, this is why I'm excited about, looking forward to coming on the show, because I love talking with other people that are trying to figure this out, right? And some of the ways we have to figure it out is to slay the old beast, which is some of the stuff I do on my page. I rip government constantly. I rip the Hobbesian thought constantly. And part of that I get from Jesus, actually. Who is Jesus bashing their brains in. It's the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the yoke placers, those who want to place yokes around people's necks. That's who Jesus is he is just hammering
the
them
money,
constantly.
the money changers in the temple. And
yeah, exactly. So I have no hesitation to call government evil, to call those in government evildoers, because they are. I worked there. I was in Capitol Hill. I worked for Richard Baker. I've seen it firsthand. I had a bird's eye view to just how evil that place is. And let me tell you, that was back in the 80s. It is worse now. And now it's just going to keep getting worse. So
don't you think that it was always born to be a vicious cycle? You look back in history, you go to Rome, and I mean, we kind of structure ourselves off of Rome, and we take, America is the melting pot, so it's a melting pot of different other viewpoints of governments as well. Government you've always seen somebody get stabbed in the back, and that's just how politics work because of how power is, how do I say it? It's like an addiction to like certain people. Because you do it with the divine. You have God. You have that power saying, oh well, God wants you to pay taxes so I can live better. Well, guess what? I'm going to believe you because I'm not going to try and defy somebody who is always looking out for me at the end of the day.
Oh, that's an excellent observation, and one that I actually factor into my article, interestingly enough, because I take political science, philosophy, political theory, societal organization. These are evolutionary disciplines. They're not static. While we see a kind of repetition in how man ends up, usually under oppression and tyranny from somebody who claims to have the authority, or the divine right of kings will lay claim to authority over the other person. And so we tend to see that a repeated pattern. But here we are in the 21st century with all this wonderful technology and the ability to connect large groups of people together, and suddenly a new conversation is emerging, and it's a conversation about anarchy and voluntarism. So there's this potential. It's a little spark right now. It's tiny. There's a little spark that could blow us into the next level of evolutionary thought about government, about organizing societies. And that's why these conversations are so central right now. We need to act like we believe this next jump can happen, this next evolutionary step into freedom can happen, because if we don't, then the Hobbesian folks will come along and say, see, you're just like you've always been, and you need rulers. And at the end of the day, Thomas Hobbes proffers this idea, because man in a state of nature is incapable of governing his passions himself. He's going to be at war with each other. We need what he referred to as an absolute monarch. This is somebody who has the power. He can drop the hammer when he wants to. Now, nobody that I know typically steps back and examines the premise of the argument, but that is exactly what we have to do, and we have to help people get there. So one of the memes I put up routinely on my page is defend the premise. And the premise is simple as this, that fallen, flawed men should govern fallen, flawed men.
Yep.
Now, when you stop and think about that, you can't say that's a legitimate premise.
Right.
Because you have two of the same people. You have two fallen people.
Right.
In both sides of the premise. And so you have to defeat one. You have to say fallen man isn't fallen and therefore doesn't need ruler, or fallen man is fallen,
and
but we shouldn't have fallen man governing fallen man.
Right. No, that's what Bastiat, that's the argument Bastiat makes in the law. And he talks about, he's like, who are these people? Are they made from different clay than we're made from? Are they angels? Or it's a very well. So what do you, as a Christian and as someone who that kind of I'm not going to say uses that, but who like aligns that with your philosophy, your worldview, political philosophy? How do you counter the arguments that will inevitably come from like Romans 13, where you're supposed to submit to authority and all this stuff, and God put that authority there for you to submit to, and all these sorts of things? What's your I have my own, but I want to hear yours. What's your counter to that?
Well, it starts with a huge problem within modern day Christianity. And it really comes down to a lack of understanding two tools that are in every Christian's toolbox called exegesis and hermeneutics. Now, we think that only pastors are supposed to know how to exegete, or simply put, interpret scripture. And then hermeneutic is a fancy word for then apply it. So when you don't even know how to properly interpret Romans 13, inevitably you're going to wander into areas that are going to tyrannize other people, are going to scare people, are going to put yokes around. That's what's happened in the average church pulpit today. So let me go through as brief as I can, exegesis of Romans 13.
Bring it.
Number one, proper exegesis requires that you understand the historical background of what is going on, who the author is, what is the occasion of the writing. See, one of the great problems we have in experiential modern day Protestant Christianity is this idea that every book of the Bible is a spiritual, alive book, insofar as there's something supernatural, spiritual about it. And then when you put little numbers next to the sentences in a particular book, you start to read the book of the Bible propositionally, like each verse is a standalone verse. Now, with that said as kind of a backdrop, you're the Apostle Paul, you're in Corinth in 56, 57 AD. You have run into Priscilla and Aquila. Now, why are Priscilla and Aquila in Corinth at this time? This is exegesis. Priscilla and Aquila are in Corinth in 56, 57 AD because Emperor Claudius in 49 AD threw all the Jews out of Rome because they were creating problems. They were stirring up all kinds of controversy. So as the ultimate dictator, the emperor, Claudius, he says, y'all are out. Well, Aquila is a Jew and Priscilla maybe is a Jew, so they're out too. So they go to Corinth. They run into Paul. Paul is a tent maker by trade, and so are Priscilla and Aquila. And they spend about a year and a half together. And imagine all the dinners they had and all the times together they had. And this is some of the stuff we miss when we read scripture. Paul and they're sharing stories, and I'm sure at some point, Aquila said, hey, Paul, there's some stuff going on in the Roman church. By the way, in 56 AD, it might only be a 15-year-old church. This is a very young group of believers there, right? We forget all this when we read Romans 13. So imagine Aquila saying, hey, Paul.
I had a priest one time say, I'm Catholic, but anyway, he's like, look, Jesus didn't hand out copies of the Bible at the Last Supper, and everybody just went out with their copy of the Bible. There's like a whole lot of, like you said, there's a lot of like conversations, a lot of word of mouth, a lot of this stuff that like different traditions and things like that developed kind of over time that were a lot of this stuff is very condensed for us now, and that we just, like you said, I really like what you said about the numbering for convenience purposes for us. We've numbered this stuff. When Paul wrote that, he didn't write it with those little numbers next to it. That's a great point. So anyway, go ahead, continue.
It's such a crucial part of the story because it is a story, because in these conversations over dinner, walking somewhere, building tents together, who knows, they're having conversations about this young church, and Paul sits down to write a letter to this church. And addresses a ton of issues in this long letter with no words, no chapter, breaks.
No delineations between subjects or anything like that. Yeah. Exactly.
It's a letter. And so in this letter is this little tiny section about government. And it essentially says all authority is ordained by God. Now, what can that mean? Now, this is where we have to do some thinking, some critical thinking about what could the Apostle Paul have been meaning at that moment he's sitting down writing this letter. Number one, we have to remember he's writing it to a distinct group of people in Rome. That is why that letter is written to this group of people there. So that now makes the thinker take a step back and say, what kind of government is in Rome at that time? Is it a representative democratic republic, or is it a totalitarian emperor monarchy kind of government? And of course, when Paul is writing to the church in Rome, they don't have a vote. They don't pick the emperor, the czar. They don't nominate and then, elect Nero to be the next. They don't have any of these political rights, absolutely none of them. So it's ludicrous, absolutely intellectually ludicrous to make a one-to-one, apples-to-apples comparison of Romans 13, 1-7, written to a young church in Rome and to the church in America in the 21st century. It is intellectually bankrupt to arrive at that conclusion when Paul is not addressing all people in all cultures at all time. That's not who he's addressing. He starts the letter out to that church. Now, there's caution here because we have to be careful not to wind up and say that the scope of every letter is just narrowly limited to that group of people. Some parts are. So when you deal with women and head coverings, for example, there are certain elements of the Bible where Paul is addressing head coverings in the church of Corinth. And there's a reason why he's addressing it there and not addressing it to the church in Ephesus or the church in Thessalonica. It's not a problem in those churches. So he is, on occasion, dealing specifically with specific problems in specific churches. And so we always have to be careful when we're interpreting the Bible to say, is this a passage that is written to all cultures, all people, for all time, or is it written to that group of people?
Well, especially with what you talked about with the context of conversations that he had with Aquila
and Priscilla.
Names. Yes, that's it. Yeah. So, anyway, yeah.
Undoubtedly, I mean, because the scriptures only record certain moments in the life of Jesus Christ.
Right.
He walked and he talked throughout the day, but for some reason, God just wanted us to know these particular portions of their conversation. Same with Priscilla and Aquila. They're having dinner together, no doubt. They're doing stuff together.
Right.
And so there's a lot of other like this conversation we're having right now will not be recorded for all of history.
Well, I was actually thinking, like, what if somebody did a transcript of this show and then put numbers next to it, and then they took like one thing, and because there was a time where you're like quoting something that someone else said that you actually disagree with, but they can put it in there and it could be like, it says right here, and it's like, no, but you have to take the whole context of the whole conversation into account. Like it's very.
And are there other ways? Are there other ways of deciphering besides common sense? I'm not going to be petty, but a lot of people kind of lack common sense and the sense of taking history into account and other things of that nature. So for like the layman who doesn't really go deep within the word, what would be your best advice for them to?
Yeah, and I would say to protect yourself, and one of the things that when I teach on hermeneutics or exegesis, one of the things I say at the beginning of the class or wherever I'm teaching this, I say exegesis is for you to learn to protect you from error. So it's like trying to build a house with only a screwdriver. You've got to have the hammer and the saw. You got to have the whole thing. Otherwise, if you just screw a lot of wood together, it may be able to provide cover, but it's not going to be a house. It's going to be something other than that. So it's really important. And here's the good news, though. It's not hard. This is actually extremely easy. One of the great errors in Christianity, modern day, well, probably from the 2nd century forward, has been this division between clergy laity. Well, you can't find that anywhere in the Bible. You can't find that distinction anywhere. We just make it up for structure and organization, much like, Chad, where those numbers came from? A monk in 1555, I think it was. He's just doing a good thing. He's trying to organize scripture to make it a little bit easier, so he puts little numbers next to all of them. Right. The trouble is, we end up in the 21st century thinking each statement stands alone. Well, no, it's part of a longer letter. So, and I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Is it Nichols?
Nicholas?
Nicholas, I'm sorry. I can't, my eyes.
Oh, I misspelled
Go on,
that.
Nico.
I think my finger. I think this has been in my pocket
Busted.
when I was walking around doing something with my life, and
We just call him Nico.
yeah,
Nico,
you can
okay,
just call
good.
him Nico. Oh yeah, nah. Wow. Oof. Well done.
No problem, Nico. So, so I want to say is that these tools are not actually hard to get, and one of the problems in modern day Christianity is in this hyper structuralism that we have is that it's almost this clergy lay distinction is artificially created to keep you from thinking you can't get this. Like only the special guy on the stage gets it.
Mm-hmm.
That's who. That's who. I used to be a special guy on the stage. I used to pastor.
And there's some of that stuff that came from like a legitimate reason, like a long time ago when like tons of people were illiterate. And so it was like, it just made sense that you went and you talked to the priest or the elder or the scholar or whatever in your the rabbi or whatever, you know what I mean? Because they were like, I read this stuff and this is what it says. There's also a danger in that because in the hands of the wrong person, they can tell you all kinds of stuff. But it's funny, like what you were saying about the using exegesis as a way to protect yourself from error. It reminds me, have you seen these things that these kids will do these videos where they have to tell their parents with written instructions how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
No.
And it's like, stick the knife in the peanut butter. And so the parent, they do this on purpose just to show like you have to be specific about your instructions. So it's like, it says, put the knife in the peanut butter jar. And so they just stick the knife handle down in the peanut butter jar. And then they're like, okay, you gotta, so then they have to
Not
read
that way.
So if you, but if you know the context of how you've seen a peanut butter sandwich be made or anything like that, those instructions are just like, it's like, oh, okay, I know, you stick the blade in, you rub it around, you get some, you spread it on and then they'll take the knife and they'll just rub the jar on the bread or something. It's like, anyway, just stuff like that where the parents are purposefully being obtuse so that they can show that like you have to be more specific because you have to treat this like somebody who has no idea and has never seen any of this stuff before is going to read it. And so in that sense, if you take that kind of context away and you just say, okay, read this stuff and interpret it literally without the historical context, without the relational context or any of these other contexts, then you're really, you're setting yourself up to make some big mistakes and lead yourself in the wrong direction. So that's really, I love the way that you tackle that, because that's not the way I would attack Romans 13, and not attack, but you know what I mean. That's not the way I would go at countering it. I would do it a different way, but that's actually a really, I'm gonna do a little bit more digging, and I'm gonna
because look at what it's done.
Too.
Good. Look at what it's done. I mean, it is yoked. It has put a yoke of burden around millions of people's necks that they have to submit to this evil thing. When in our form of government, I make the case as a Christian, we should be an outright revolution at this point. To be a good steward of the gift that was given to us on those battlefields across the Northeast and down the East Coast during the period 1776 through 1783. To be a good steward of those sacrifices made for independence, we should be in total rebellion right now. Total rebellion. And joyfully do.
And I think a lot of people miss the context too. In the fact that a lot of these misinterpretations, and even if, because you're right, we don't really know what they were saying and how the context of the full conversations that were going on and those kinds of things, but we certainly know how people who want to continue to be in power, whether they're religious or in government, can twist the living crap out of that and make it mean whatever the heck they want it to. And we need to always remember that is what people in power are doing, are trying to retain their power. So they're going to use tools, whether that tool is a gun, or whether that tool is religion or whatever it is, to control the masses. And I think that is I don't think anybody in their right mind thinks that Donald Trump's a religious person. And yet you have all of these people, making a big deal of Donald Trump. And one of the things that you've pointed out on your page that I thoroughly love is this absolute worship of the Constitution. Don't get me, and again, I've said this myself. All of this needs to be taken in context. You talked earlier about Hobbes and Locke. Well, my opinion is Locke kicked the crap out of Hobbes in his rebuttal, but you're also right that Locke wasn't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But Locke was a very long time ago. So many people that are anarchists want to not give any credit to people like Thomas Paine or John Locke or George Washington, for that matter, who are not anarchists, but they were pointing us in a particular direction that lead us to that greater understanding.
Right.
So I've been being quiet for a minute. I've got a lot of stuff going on.
No, go ahead, man.
But
it's funny that you connect those two, because it's like, in a sense, like there was like the 400, not 400, a couple of years in the Dark Ages, and there was no advancement, and every time like somebody would speak out on science, like, hey, you want to check out some science? They were like, no. So then everything would be shut down. But in the sense of how all of those guys have spoken up for, hey, this is the right way to live your life. This is life. Nobody should really be in government or governing over you, because they fought for their own freedom at the end of the day, that they fought for what they believe that they needed to do, so that they can live an easier life. So it kind of is reminding me of how that is relevant to today. A lot of things are very blatant and out there, and how people just need to just start being more open to ideas.
I'll tell you, Nico, I think that is spot on. And I think it's our job. I mean, Jesus talked about this principle of you can't pour new wine into old wineskins. And the reason Jesus used that imagery was because old wineskins are made of leather and they get crusty. And when you put new wine that's still fermenting in them, they explode. So Jesus says you cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. You pour new wine into new wineskins because they're pliable, they're open, they can handle the fermentation process. I applied that same principle to anarchy. I say, well, a lot of the old wineskins, my generation, I'm a boomer, and my generation cannot handle the new wine of anarchy and voluntarism. They just can't. So I'm not trying to actually pour into them. I'm trying to pour into Gen Xers and millennials who are new wineskins. But within that new group of wineskin need to come new leaders who can shepherd and help and serve and care for this Gen X community. And Nico, right to your point, this is our calling, if you will. This is your moment to say, we do know a new way forward. We actually do know a new way. This is the next big leap forward. And from the Christian perspective, exegesis and hermeneutics helps us to have confidence and firmness in what we're saying. Because I don't want to get on the radio here and say something wrong and mislead somebody. I don't want to do that. So I have to do my homework first. Even in the political context of understanding the Constitution, Marcus, you may have seen here recently, I've put up posts on my page talking about, do you know the 4 delegates to the convention that left in protest? And I can just about guarantee that 99.999% of the people in my Facebook community do not know who they are. They don't even know 4 left in protest. That's unheard of. Yet their historic record shows that there are 4 that left in protest. Not only did they leave in protest, they left information about as to why they left in protest. So they took it a next step further and said, we're out of here. The Philadelphia Convention.
Here's our dissent.
Yeah, what's that?
Here's our dissenting opinion, too.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And they write it down. And so you've got Luther Martin, Robert Yates, John Lansing, and John Mercer out of the convention in mid-July, end of July, because they know what's going on there. Now, that kind of takes the glow off the divine constitution, right? This great spirit of unity that was there in Philadelphia. Well, it ain't so united when 4 guys bail because of what they say is going on there. They're principled people. They're making a principled stand. And they're saying, we're out of here because we know what's going on here. So that's our job. That's our job is to enlighten people to truth, whether it be biblical truth and keeping it in context so we don't yoke people in America to believe they have to submit to the president and Congress and the mayor and the governor and all this nonsense. Jefferson, in his famous writing in the Declaration of Independence, said it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish, or later on, it's the duty of the people to throw off a government that is crushing unalienable rights. That's our job. That's what we should be doing. And then imagining what comes after. Well, now we've got a beautiful story to tell about the future. We know what evil looks like because we just have spent the last 200 years in it. Nico, you're a black man. You know what our form of government did to your family, did to your ancestors. I live in Oklahoma. My gosh, I'm here with American Indians who still grieve, even though they didn't experience getting pushed off Georgia. They got pushed off Georgia, right? That's where their family's from. And we took it from them just because we could, because we claimed some law. So Congress passes the Indian Removal Act, and suddenly your land's ours. It's our land down there now. You go to Oklahoma.
My friend said one of the I'm sorry to cut in, but like one of the funniest and simplest things is one of the most dangerous things in this world is a piece of paper and a pen.
Yeah, exactly.
You could create anything, legit anything. And there's plenty of gullible people to believe whatever you got to say. And not even gullible, because, you know, I have the means to back me. I have what is necessary to back me. So yeah, it's vicious. It's been pretty sad.
And see, and that's our job, is to draw people into these conversations, because I believe at some fundamental level, just like I was infected, and I really mean infected. I was Mr. GOP. I got pictures. I used to have a wall of fame where I had pictures of them shaking hands of presidents and congressmen and all this stuff. And when I went through this kind of journey that I led to where I am now, I took all those pictures down. They're up in my attic somewhere now. I used to brag about them. You know, my character was really flawed when I worked in Congress, and I loved the power of working in Congress and all the accolades, people, my family. Mark works for Congressman Wortley.
It's like Nico said, it's like an addiction. It's like it's just like a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction or anything like that. It's the ring of power. It gives you, yeah, it is. It's just like that. It's like, I gotta put this thing back on, you know, and then you get a little bit too close to die, and you know the ring wraiths come after you, and then it's like, oh, let me take this off. It's like, man, you get a little too far, they're gonna stab you with that blade.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so, but then becomes our job, you know, to confront the thinking, but then paint a picture of beauty going forward. Not perfect, because it's not going to be perfect, but it can be a lot better than this. And so back to my article real quickly, right, challenge the idea of who's right. Is God right or Hobbes right? Man in the state of nature. My argument came from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26, where it says, we were created in his image. Now, what does that even mean? You know, we sometimes we read verses like that, or we hear statements like that, that all man is created in God's image, and we wonder, what does that mean? Well, obviously, Chad does not look like God, and I don't. I mean, we can't. So we, you know, I kind of set you up for that. I can see you sitting back in your chair there. I kind of knew you would take that. But really, we can immediately dismiss that God could not have been talking about looks there. Secondly, we know God has these divine attributes of omniscience, of omnipresence, of omnipotence. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. He's every place at all times. And so obviously we don't have those either. I don't have divine attributes like God, so he can't have met that. So we rule out, we look like God, we don't have his divine attributes. What does that verse mean? What does it mean to be in his image? This is where I think anarchy comes into play in a big way. Why do we love? Because God loves. Why do we have joy? Because God has joy. Why do we desire justice? Because God desires justice. Why are we creative? Because God's creative. All these natural impulses that we have somehow resemble him. And one of the great struggles that the Christian community has with this is a kind of elitism. And it almost comes across as, yeah, when you're created in God's image, he's really only speaking to Christians there. So in my article, I write this. I say, I'm 61 years old. I've seen a lot in my life. I've been around some of the most wonderful Muslim friends that I could ever describe to you who have great marriages. They reject Christianity overtly. We are not going to follow Jesus Christ. Yet I would model my marriage after their marriage because he loves his wife, she loves her husband, their kids are remarkable kids. So how did that happen if image bearing only relates to Christians? Well, there's something much bigger to this idea of being created in his image that any of us can fully wrestle with and fully understand. But we all share this common set of values, if you will, these attributes of love, compassion, care, joy, kindness, service, justice. We all share this list, and I list them off in my article. And my whole conclusion is to say, I get to the conclusion of these are best
froze up
represented
there for a second.
in an
Go ahead.
Was that?
You
Did
froze
I?
up for a
I'm
second.
sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So I sum my article up these list of attributes, and I argue at the end of my article, this is best understood in an anarchist society. Now, the problem is within this beautiful thing that God created of humanity, and with all these wonderful attributes, there's always a small percentage of people that are really major league flawed. They murder, they rape, they steal, they want power over people. They end up in government. Well, the only way you stop this group is by not having government. This just becomes now a logical deduction. Well, if this small group is present in every population, and it is, who will raise their hand and say, I think I know how to better run things, and they ask for you to support them, how do we stop that group from getting into power? You don't have government. You don't have the structure in place for them to raise their hand and say, I want to be part of it. Yeah. Because the reality is, we all are anarchists already, and we don't know it. So I did this little survey for part of my article. I went 6 months and examined my interactions with people. In that 6 months window, I never once was raped, murdered, stolen from. In fact, all of my interactions, except one group of people, all of my interactions were hi, mostly, hello, thank you, glad, how you doing today, waving people in the car. These were my natural interactions. This is the image bearing natural interactions, whether you're Jew, Gentile, Muslim, homosexual, it doesn't matter, black, white, Asian, it doesn't matter. I was having these constant positive voluntary interactions, usually with hi, hello, bye, thank you, somewhere in that mix. There was this one group that constantly harassed me. And you're laughing, Chad, because you know who it is. It's called government. So I get pulled over for not having my seatbelt on because I don't wear my seatbelt. I can't stand, I'm 61, I grew up in a day, I recognize Gen Xers and millennials want to tell me I'm stupid. My kids tell me this all the time, I get it. I'm not wearing it. I don't like to wear it. I get pulled over by a guy with a car and blue lights and given a $25 citation for not wearing my seatbelt. Who harasses me via the U.S. mail? A letter with emblazoned across the top right, IRS or EPA or whatever government title. They're the only group in that 6 month window that was screwing with me. The only group. Nobody else raped, murdered, stole from me. Nobody did. And so I backed up from that and I said, wow, we have got everything major screwed up here.
Yeah,
We are.
yeah.
And so my job now is to try to help people imagine, what does it mean to be an image bearer of God in community without government? And then what I say back to people, you're already doing it. You're already there.
Mm-hmm.
So I live in Logan County, Oklahoma. If government disappeared today in Oklahoma, in Logan County, Oklahoma, there was no county council, nothing, all gone, we would still trade with each other.
Mm-hmm.
We would still buy each other's bread and gas and whatever else. None of those happen because of government. And so we have to, I think, guys, we have to make good, strong, moral arguments in favor, because anarchy is morally superior. There's just no chance you have a chance to undermine anarchy morally.
Mm-hmm.
Why are all the government leaders trying to tear that word down now, calling BLM anarchists? They're terrified of that word.
Oh yeah, they did the same thing with Antifa. Antifa is supposedly anarchists. BLM is anarchists. The people who throw stuff through the what was it, the World Bank, meetings and all that stuff. Where they have their little, the G8 summit, the G20 summit. They're throwing Molotov cocktails through the Starbucks windows and throwing trash cans and all that stuff. Marcus, you were trying to say something a while back and you never really got.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, it's all good. I want to comment on this real quick, and then I'll get to what I was going to say. But what I want to comment on this isn't a new thing. Emma Goldman, who it wouldn't be the exact same kind of anarchist that I would consider myself,
right.
But Emma Goldman talked about this in one of her books, and I don't remember the title of it, where she talks about how she's not violent, but they'll do everything they can to paint her as violent and as going out of her way to cause chaos and do these things, and purposefully, even if it didn't have anything to do with government at all, they call anything that's negative anarchy, because that puts it in people's minds that that's what that means. Anybody who, it takes 10 minutes to really look at what the word anarchy means finds out very quickly it is nothing more than no rulers.
It's just the opposite of tyranny. That's all it is.
Right. So I just wanted to comment that this isn't a new problem, but it actually ties into what I wanted to talk about earlier that I think Chad was talking about, and that is that I'm actually quite hopeful. Mark, you've talked about earlier that we're a very small minority, and that's absolutely true. I also agree that we're never going to be the majority. That's never going to happen. Never, not once. But compare. When you look at, I think about Lysander Spooner. That man was by himself in the woods.
Yeah.
There's nobody else hanging out. Even if you look at like Murray Rothbard and how just outside of the norm he was, and he died in what, 93?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the millions of people that there are worldwide right now that call themselves an anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
We are growing very quickly.
Yes, right.
And I will point out why I'm hopeful is because the focus on a peaceful revolution towards a free society that is voluntary is growing so fast that I can't keep track of it. And I think that the reactions that we're seeing in the world right now with COVID and with other things is a reaction to stamp that down because they're scared.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is they don't understand. People who employ violence don't understand people who do not employ violence. They can't get it. So I'm hopeful because people are seeing every day, they're waking up, their eyes are opening to the possibility of a free society. Mm-hmm. It took 3% of the American population to overthrow the largest empire the world had ever seen in the 1770s. Mm-hmm. We won't even need that. Mm-hmm. So I am very hopeful.
And
I think that we are moving in that direction.
Yeah, and to the thing that you were saying at the very beginning, Mark, about not ever meeting anyone who was born an anarchist. Well, let me tell you. Okay, so mine weren't born anarchists, but they became anarchists at a very young age, and I'd be willing to bet their kids are going to be anarchists when they're born. So, like,
Yes.
we're and it's that that. What I love about this is that this is the kind of episode and the kind of guest where it's like, man, like I think I could show this episode to everybody I know, because this whole thing is very there's a lot of the stuff that is it's a little more out there, and it has a very target audience, and it's it won't be as well received with those folks, but like no, I mean, like this is something that is approved, has the stamp of approval for the Dave Ramsey crowd and the Dr. James Dobson crowd, and the what I mean, like you know what I'm saying, like it's not every anarchist podcast guest is so approved, and so I've really appreciated that, because that's I'm kind of interested to see where we go after this when we do the after show, but
me too.
I think that, to Marcus's point, the hope that's there for just because I've seen it start to, like, I'm connected with some people who are in like a very, when I first met them and first started to come into contact with them, it was a very pro-Trump, very more of like a, look, the Democratic Party has been screwing over the Black community, so at least Trump is not that, and he's doing some stuff that is making it to where it's in some ways it's better for the Black community, and even within that group there's been like some pivoting, as I mean, I've had some influence, but there's been other people who've had influence, and some of this stuff has just kind of come on its own from, like, as you start to branch out and meet different people and everything. But I have witnessed that. I have seen this whole mentality shift from a duopoly, let's pick which one is offering the best scenario for our either niche group or for me, myself, my profession, whatever the case may be, to now it's like, hey, maybe screw both of these parties, and either let's don't vote, or let's vote for the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or Kanye West or whatever the case may be, something that says, we don't, like what Ayn Rand used to say, like, me not voting is me rejecting the options on the table. Yeah. So it's not me cowering away or giving permission by tacit consent. No, it is me saying, I reject what's on the table. I don't want any of these offers, like it's a complete, and I'm seeing more of that. And there's a, I think the biggest thing is the more people start to awaken to it, the more people start to think and to realize, hey, wait a second, maybe we're being played by both sides of this thing. And maybe we need to broaden our horizons and open our options up a little bit more. And that's been really exciting to watch. So,
yeah, no, I'm with you guys on this. I'm very hopeful for the future. My only dark side of my life is that I'm 61 with 2 comorbidities. And so I can only hope I live long enough to see it, but I think it's inevitable. I think with DeFi out there, I think with Web 3.0 out there, I think the sociopaths in government hear the footsteps behind them. And pretty soon they're going to be not just walking footsteps, they're going to be running and jogging steps. And then we're going to steamroll the status quo. This is, I believe, inevitable. I think they know it. I think there's a great transfer of wealth going on right now in preparation for a major philosophical jump forward. Now, it could be a jump forward. My great fear is that we really go into the strongman type of scenario, and we go backwards. And COVID-19 honestly has given me a little bit of pause on this because of the fear that they were able to gin up so quickly in people, and the terror that I still see in the stores. When I I'm in there with people. People have been really damaged by these sociopaths, and so where maybe a year ago I would have said the steamroll was going to happen easier and quicker over traditional status quo government. I'm now a little bit more hesitant to say that because of what I've seen with COVID-19 and how quickly they ramped up and scared the heck out of everybody. And fear is a powerful emotion, guys. I have it,
definitely. And I that's part of like this other thing I was talking about earlier. Like I had an exchange with a friend of mine, and Marcus and Nico know because I talked about some of our exchanges before. He's a statist who he's kind of like I don't know. I think there's hope there, but I keep like ruining it. I think because I'm too argumentative. And so anyway. So Chandler, I apologize. I was not kind. I was not charitable. But I think that's what it is. It's that fear, because I was talking about I was like, look, man, how long is it going to be until you can have like full capacity at football stadiums and stuff like that for games? When if not now, what's the trigger? What's our, what's the thing that makes it all okay where we get to go back to normal again? Or are we just going to accept this and live like this forever? It can't be like this forever. Or I guess it could, but nobody wants to say it's going to be like this forever, because they are like hoping that somebody magically comes and saves them from it, and wields the vaccine wand or whatever to make them feel safe, even though they're not any more safe than they would have been, probably less safe actually. But then the other part of it is like you have to at some point just say like, look, stuff happens, and I don't wish ill on anybody, but like we've got to move on. And we can do things in a smart way, but I think there's so much evidence out there that like all this stuff with like forcing people to wear masks or get, there's just so much of this stuff where the experts are like saying one thing 7 months ago, something completely different 3 months later, something completely different now. And I'm like, man, y'all have like 100 something, hundreds of years worth of epidemiology that you've been studying, and y'all just like wish-washed on masks and on like the distance and how long something is on surface. Like in like 5 months, y'all went back and forth 3 different times. Come on. Like y'all can't see that, like Marcus said, the mask is like a talisman. It's like, it's more of like, I feel safe now. Doesn't matter that I'm breathing all this stuff in and out and keeping all this bacteria right up against my face, and washing your hands over and over again ruins the microbiome that's on your hands and the good bacteria that can help to fight off bad bacteria. Like none of that. We just throw all that stuff out of the window because we have to believe science. Like since when did believing science was that ever a thing? Like the whole point of science is there's no belief.
Yeah, right. You don't have belief. It's like consensus math. Consensus math. Do we believe in consensus math?
Right. No. Right.
This is a real problem, Chad, and we've got to come up with a good response to this.
No,
One of the ways I've toyed with trying to deal with this is I've asked people who are afraid, and they've been made to be afraid.
Right.
I asked them, and they're kind of teetering on, I think I will give more liberty to government, because they're going to help me feel safer. One of the things I've asked them to at least consider, what would a COVID-19 response look like in an anarchist society? Which, if you stop and imagine what it would have been like, it would have been much better than anything we've done.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, in an anarchist society, we would have been able to immediately ramp up to take care of the patient. If this truly was going to deliver a huge load of patients to the ER, we would not have had the regulation that slows the construction of every medical facility down to a snail's pace. That wouldn't be there. You would throw up, and the level of design that goes into a medical facility nowadays would have been cut in half. And so we would have been okay with tents if we needed tents to care for a large influx of patients. We wouldn't have said, oh no, it has to have 48-inch doors, and you can't
Right.
build it unless it's got 48-inch wide doors and handrails that are 36 inches above the ground. And so all these regulatory burdens in an anarchist society would not be there, and we would have been able to immediately ramp up the care for this large influx of patients if they actually emerged. Then scientists that would not have been able or had any incentive to commingle with politicians would have been able to deliver their opinions about what is coming, what this thing is, and what to do about it. Yeah. And then we, as mature human beings created in the image of God, would have been able to say, well, that makes sense. I think I'll put my mask on. Or
and that's actually what I was going to say. I actually think that one of the things that they've done is they've actually made it to where either people are wearing masks out of compliance or they're not wearing them out of non-compliance. Yeah. And it doesn't even have anything to do with, at this point, the science or the health of it. It's just some people are wearing it just because they have to. And then other people are like, you said I have to, so even if it's good for me, I'm not doing it. We're like little rebellious children, where we're like, you said I have to eat, I'm not eating. You know what I mean? Like, well, you're going to starve to death, fool. Like, and so I think there's a lot of that. It's true. Like you're the actually getting, instead of that cozy, listen to these experts, but not those. In fact, what we will do is we'll deplatform all of those experts. Right. We'll make it to where they don't get to talk anymore ever again.
Right. And see, in a voluntary society, there's no incentive to control the population because you can't control the population. Mm-hmm. There's no mechanism to control it. Right. So you remove that incentive from sociopaths that are in science. They're there. Sociopaths that are in government, they're almost exclusively all there.
Right.
When you take away the incentive for them or the ability for them to act in their sociopathology, guess what the human being benefits from? Freedom.
Right.
This beautiful idea of we've got a horrific virus that came on shore. What are we going to do about it? Well, first let's get the experts. And let's see if they can give us their best opinion without any law to do anything about it. There's no law to pass because there's no place to pass a law. So now the news report becomes panel A has crunched this data about this virus and suggests the following recommendations. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
We already have this in video games and some other things where they have these review things. And I guess you could buy them off, but if there's 8 different magazines writing about different video games as they come out, you find the one that you believe in because you love the games that they love, and then you gravitate towards that. And all the nonsense about you being lied to and be like, man, y'all said this game was great, this game is terrible. Well, that has a way of self-regulating in that industry. Go ahead, Marcus. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, and kind of to Mark's point at the very beginning of this, where you had the bad person on one side, the bad person on the same other side. One of the things that I've said before, but this is still true, is that not only do we have solutions, just like when they ask about the roads, we actually do know how to solve that problem. What on the other side of that, they do not. If anything has been proven by this entire thing with the COVID-19, it is that these people are completely and totally incompetent. They have no idea what they're doing. And if you can't see it, watch the timeline of suggestions. Watch what they said this thing does. They don't have the first clue what they're doing.
No, these are I'm sorry.
What I propose right now is that we kind of wrap up
and go
with this, and then move into the next show.
Hit that quote one time though before, because Mark was hitting on the quote for the show, the Jung.
Jung quote. The Jung quote. It is I don't have it called up, but it is the moral. There is no morality without freedom,
without freedom, there is no morality. I think it's in
without freedom, there is no morality.
Yeah,
Which is Carl Jung. I was actually going to throw this quote in as well. We do a quote for every episode, and that was the one that I chose for this one was the Jung quote. But I also like this quote for to kind of finish up this part of the conversation, and it is by our friend John Locke. He said, "There is only one thing which gathers people into seditious commotion, and that is oppression." And the one thing that gives me hope, again, to the cure for this definite lockdown of people, and I touched on it earlier, is that they're overreacting. Government is going too far. And that oppression that they're going to cause is going to cause people to start examining their belief systems and start changing them and start adopting a voluntary society, because they're going to see what force has done for them. So this is the end. I suggest people go, if they would like to hear a little more of this, for $5 a month, you can become a patron of this program. And we do go a little longer, and sometimes those, and I'd say most of the time, those
some juicy stuff
can be the good stuff. And
this was great. This was great. That's not to say this was absolutely excellent. So I'm just really interested to see how it is after this, because it's going to be good.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So please like, share, and definitely hit that bell icon. Become a patron. Go to Anchor and subscribe, and please support what we're doing here. I need a new camera. I need a new microphone. I'd like to build this production out more, because I think that we offer something that a lot of people don't, and that is solutions. Can
I jump in real quick there?
Sure.
Marcus, just to follow up what you're saying, and I want to encourage everybody to hit the bell as well. Here's what you heard from this group of folks on this show. You heard hope. That there could actually be a better way. And folks, we need that now. We've got to have people like this out there talking all the time, because they're not just condemning the status quo. They're actually offering hope that it can be better. So please support these guys.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate
Nico
that.
needs a stand for his phone so he can have to hold it. Is your arm getting sore? Yeah, your back hurts. I bet it does.
I over for about like an hour and a half, but it's okay though. You know?
Right. But on top of that, the links to Mark's site are going to be down below, as well as his Facebook page. I strongly suggest that people go check him out. I have really enjoyed, and I don't say this about everybody that I followed on Facebook, but I have really enjoyed his content. He has good, thoughtful content.
Thank you.
So support the people that are making a difference.
Absolutely.
And stay free, my friends.
Peace.